time for another round of Brandy. Candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand. With your hosts, Reilly, Newman, and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
And welcome back to another round of Brandy. Today we are discussing something rather large that happened last week. It was an outage that affected customers of all service types across the board, literally countless people from Venmo to other financial services and email and all kinds of things. And it was the outage of AWS, which is Amazon Web Services.
It affected like over 100 services, and it went from it started like 3 a.m. on Monday Eastern time, and then they finally reported that everything was back to normal and everything was back up and running 15 hours later. So all of Monday. And then if anything, it spurred a lot of conversations about how the current structure or infrastructure of the internet it's maybe outdated, because now we have such a dependency on it. And when so many people utilize the power of one company's computing services or that are, serving up the internet, and if it has any issues, or are so dependent on one platform, one avenue, one lane, one basket to put all of their eggs in as a brand or business, that can lead to some problems. If something happens to that platform, if all of a sudden the model changes or cultural shifts, right? I mean, anytime you put all your eggs in a basket. I mean, I don't do a lot of investing. I know you do, but we have a balanced portfolio. It's like we don't put all of our, investment into one particular lane in stocks. We kind of broad, and that's because we're doing long-term investing.
I think it just varies depending on whether it's business, investments, and your time horizon, which like you said, long-term versus short-term. And there's a lot of different things, but even with AWS, with the outage, it is because so many of these companies became dependent on cloud storage, cloud computing, overall just web services in that way. And you had everything from Venmo to even Shopify to these companies that were using AWS, because AWS, again, in the grand scheme of things, it was like AWS is working 99% of the time, yeah. And then this is the one.
Yeah, and this is not we're not talking smack about Amazon Web Services. I mean, but the point is hypothetical. And I think I came in the next day, or earlier last week, I remember we started a conversation. It was like, dude, what if the people that are social influencers, these are people that are in their 20s, late 20s and stuff, that have spent the last 5 or 6 years, right, making a good living, right, being social influencers. Yep. What if Instagram just shut down? What if, kind of like with TikTok, when TikTok was being threatened to be done with in the United States, businesses and brands were freaking out. Social media influencers this is my livelihood. What would businesses and brands do to thrive or just to survive? Yeah,
the only instance I can think of where we did kind of experience that was with Vine. If you remember Vine was the first short, quick kind of format where you had a lot of these comedians who are now big on Instagram, and of course Vine. I think Vine was purchased by Twitter at some point, but Vine was a super quick. That's where you now get these skits and sketches that are Instagram and Reels and all of that. It all came from Vine, and a lot of those comedians, pretty much Vine just shut down, and they had huge following, and they had to pretty much restart on Instagram and then TikTok and all that. So yeah. They had their material down, and they were able to redo it in a totally different ground. But it kind of goes back to that saying of don't build your house on rented land. Yeah. And it's you can get the rug pulled out, just like with the TikTok thing. It's okay, at a certain point, you're not in control of TikTok. TikTok can do whatever they want. Instagram can do whatever they want. They can charge you money. They can change their rate. They can change the algorithm. They can change whatever they want. They could block your account. They could remove you, because it's ultimately their property you're playing on. And it reminds me of that story of, on a very kind of evil level, was what happened to Sam Walton on his first kind of prototype store of Walmart, was that he started this retail store. He was hitting the price points just right. This thing was clicking very, very well. And he was paying lease to his landlord. And at a certain point, his lease came up, and the landlord pretty much said, "Hey, Sam," this is the guy who started Walmart, "Sam, you did a great job with your Walmart store, but I'm not going to renew your lease. You're out, but I'm going to keep the store going under my..." So he pretty much just copied the Walmart formula and then did it on his property. right? And then kicked Sam out, and then Sam went out and started Walmart in other locations, which it worked out, but it still was, okay, he started something on completely rented facilities, rented land.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's like, you're not in charge of that, it is scary. And I think that's where a lot of these companies are reliant on these infrastructures, whether it's the App Store or social media, where they're not in control of it. And that's kind of where the buck's going to stop at a certain point, where the owner kind of gets the last say. And then you saw it with the App Store too, where those apps would complain about Apple taking, I think they take 30%, but it's also Apple's store.
Well, it's so funny too. I feel like people always have a beef and complaint with like the social media platforms, like their rights are being deprived or whatever thing else. And it's like, guys, it's basically you're giving them your email, but it's free.
Yeah.
And you know, like there's been times, especially like there's so many ads or just like all the, you know, like there's times when I have considered getting off, just ditching Instagram, Facebook, and all that stuff. Like we were talking about last week when I brought up the subject matter, it was like, you know, the new generation we've talked about, the young 20s, right? I think it's Generation Alpha. What is the generation they're referring to now? Okay, Generation Z. They're wanting
Zoomers.
honesty. They want truthfulness. They want transparency. They want real human relationships. There's an increase in wanting to actually spend time with people together, actually the way that we used to do it, versus virtual. Right? It's almost like they're pushing back, and I think they're leading the day and age of a renaissance of doing life. That's why celluloid film and cameras are coming back, as opposed to, well, you got your smartphone in your pocket. Yeah, but I don't want that. I want to carry around an actual camera and take pictures. Or they're celebrating in some of that classics, and so it got me thinking: what if, hypothetical, there was a cultural shift in the next 4 or 5 years where social media as a platform is being rejected by the new, you know, by Generation Z? Then what, right? And you know, I've always argued I don't think print will ever die. You know, I think there's a place for print. I think that's why people still like books. They still like magazines. They still like a newspaper or a journal, something that is tangible that we can hold.
Yeah, and there's something special about like books and physical, tangible things. Speaking of books, there's actually this award-winning book named Brandy. Okay. If you enjoy this podcast, you can go on Amazon and find this book in hardcover, softcover, or Kindle.
Yeah,
and that's a slight little plug. But to Scott's point, I think the scary thing about building on the internet is that, so the internet is based off of you being able to reach a lot of people. That's why geographical borders were broken. You weren't, now as a business, you're not competing with the shop down the street or in your county. Now you're competing with the guy on the other coast, the guy or lady running the business on the other side of the world.
Harder too.
Yeah, it's great. It's increased competition. I think it's healthy, but it's also, it's up the stakes. And so based off that, then the internet has not only increased the amount of access and the amount of volume of options, information, things like that, is that now when you look at someone who is, in my mind, a business who's dependent on the internet is someone who's based off of, they need the numbers. They're playing the numbers game where they go, okay, I'm spending $1,000, $10,000 a month on Google ads. I need to get this kind of click through to be able to convert these many people into buying my product. That's becoming too dependent on it, because if they change their algorithm, like Google has, and especially now with AI, the algorithm shifting drastically, you can get the rug pulled out on you. And then you're dependent on that one single valve, when, just like in the TikTok scenario, you had influencers who were based solely on the attention that TikTok was driving that happened to go to them on that medium on TikTok. And once that changes, they're left out high and dry, because they're not the ones generating the attention. They're the ones who are kind of capturing it, and they're able to push products and act like they're using products and sell them. But to me, it's like, that's kind of the issue here, is that if you build your house on rented land, no matter where the attention is focusing, that attention can shift and swing. And just like Scott was saying with like the younger generation, although they say they do want, you know, authenticity and all these things, it comes down to signaling. They're trying to counter signal something. Usually younger generations will always counter signal what the older generation has done.
Yeah.
And millennials and stuff were tech focused, app focused, thanks to Apple, thanks to Facebook, thanks to all these different things. And so now the younger generation is going to be more focused on signaling the opposite of that. And so the pendulum swings. And now whoever built a house on the technological app side of it, they're going to be left holding the bag because the younger generations, they don't want that anymore. Yeah. They're going to switch over to
that's
analog.
Your dad's way
that's
of
your
doing things.
Yeah, and like that's your now that's your dad's problem. Where it's like, okay,
yeah.
if they don't want that, then what?
It's
then
like going into a restaurant and wanting, can I look at a menu? No, I've got to use my phone or scan a code, and I didn't bring my reading glasses to read that small print on my phone or whatever it is. Right? There's so many like new things that are harder for middle to older folks to, because things are changing and being, there's always, it's a cycle.
Yeah.
Every generation deals with it.
And I think, so as humans, where the eye is gazed is like the desire of the human. And so no matter where the human's looking, that's why like a pitcher, you don't take your eye off of where you're throwing the ball. A batter, you don't take your eyes off the ball. Like your eyes help dictate so much of what we want. And that's that desire, but also that attention. That's our main focus. And so when you do look at something as, especially in a world of like now we're all have short attention spans, it's like the attention shifting. That's a scary thing for these businesses who are focused on, we completely sell on Instagram or we completely sell on TikTok. Once that attention starts shifting as easy as it can of someone just shifting what they're looking at, then you're going to be in trouble and in hot water. So there's like, what do you do as a brand to be able to expand beyond that, to look at where could the attention possibly go? How do I start diversifying my business so that I'm covering these different bases and I'm not just like a common analogy in business or investing is like having a three-legged stool. Is like you don't want a stool to sit on that only has one leg, because if that leg gets knocked out or the integrity, it breaks. You want a three-legged stool because then you're dependent on three different kind of variables in it.
What if you have a four-legged stool? I have a four-legged stool in my garage.
Six-legged.
Yeah. A six-legged stool.
So it's like, I think to the point of it is like, going back to AWS, yes, you did have these businesses that were completely dependent on Amazon and the technology, which is great, right? Amazon made it accessible. Amazon's big enough where they're able to do something like that. But there may be this transition, which I'm already seeing on LinkedIn, and some of these companies considering, what if we built our own server and databases so we're localized, which is kind of ironic. But this also does lean into the whole decentralized networks and what cryptocurrency is all about too. So you see the infrastructure and the actual technology might be going that way, which even Jason Fried, who's the creator of 37 Signals, which one of their apps is like Basecamp, which is a large task management software and stuff. And he was talking about how they made that switch a long time ago because they're like, it doesn't make sense for our whole company, for this whole software to be based off of cloud services, when we need to be in control of that. We need to be able to, if there's an issue or a fire, we need to be able to address that, get it fixed, because ultimately it's their customers. Like, does Amazon, like Venmo went down, does Amazon care about that? Like, it's not, Venmo users aren't Amazon's customers per se, but.
So bottom line is, we're talking both the business and brand aspect, but I think it's more from the brand standpoint too. And I think that, it's one of those things where if you find a way to reach your customers, but if you're so leaning heavily on that if one day that has to change or alter, what's that going to do? And if you're only focused, like with all things we talk about with your brand, if you're only focused on the here and now and you're not forward thinking, you're not looking down either a couple steps ahead or just looking at tomorrow or the next day with regards to your brand, then you're going to be only dependent on the here and now, and that could change.
Even makes me think of like 2020 when that huge shift happened of like behavior, where we had not only mobile order behavior really uptick, where that became the new norm, even
touchless,
touchless
interaction,
all of that. Like even I remember Apple Wallet, like people barely used Apple Wallet. And then ever since then, now it's become a lot of people use it. I barely carry my wallet with me. Now I just use Apple Wallet. And you saw that change in behavior. So then it's like everything else slides over from there. So if you were a company that was dependent on something because you always thought, well, it's always been this way, and like it's always going to be this way, then that's an issue, because it's like, no, something can change.
Yeah.
And especially on like the digital front.
Of again, putting that phrase of putting all your eggs in one basket, because if that basket gets dropped, you break all your eggs. And that can, you know, for some brands that are newer, like big brands, right? You know, they're going to weather that little hiccup. They'll figure things out. They'll move. Oh yeah, they use social media or this platform, and but they also have their, you know, irons in so many other things that they'll get covered. But the small brands, the ones that are starting out, the ones that maybe are still trying to figure out how to really construct and build and grow their brand into a successful brand, they're not. Their approach is different. They're starting off by choosing a platform, choosing a method of reaching out. And the question is, are you doing it in multiple different ways? So if there's one aspect of that shuts down or is gone or removed or outdated now, you're not having to completely rebuild your brand again. Much like you said with the Vine users and the people that had built up the following, all of a sudden they're like,
and then,
that platform's gone. Okay, now I've got to go back and rebuild up a presence altogether.
Yeah, and that's also why like even mailing lists have survived so well, and like email still has probably some of the highest conversion rates for businesses. It's still a very underutilized marketing tool. The power of it is amazing, and guess what? You can take your email list with you. You can export your CSV, and you can take it wherever you want because you own that. You own the names and the emails that are on there, and so it's way more powerful because you can't do that with your followers. You can't export your followers on your Instagram or anything. You can't pull anything from that. So
I guess you could take screenshots of your Instagram, but like, what are you going to do? Because half the time it's like there's no other connection. You're right. There's no data, and
part of the problem is that social media is completely based off of, like Scott was saying at the beginning, of it's free, but when it's free, you're the product. So whether you're the business or the user, you're the product that they're making money off of one way or another. And that's part of the, like right there, you see that the platform and the user are at odds, where you're the product in it, and they're using you to generate revenue somehow.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like, you got to wake up at a certain point and realize, I can't do that. And just like any good IT person, or even like operationally, you're going to have redundancies put in. So even if you're like, okay, if I'm doing most of my commerce on Shopify, what kind of redundancies do I have in place if Shopify does have a 15-hour hiccup, or they have something that's going to create complications? What's my plan B? And just exercise through that and go, okay, what's operationally, logistically, what can I do if that happens? Probably a good exercise.
Well, it's opening things up to new ways of doing too, because if that's the way that you're used to doing things, what happens where are things going to be in 5 years with either quote unquote social media or the new platform, the new way of reaching as consumers? How are we being engaging with our brands and products? Things are always evolving and changing.
Yeah.
And so it's that idea of just being open, and asking yourself the right questions and making sure that you've got backups if you can, or backup plans, or diversification. Diversify your brand.
That's also healthy just for your business as a whole, is that you're actually trying these different areas. But I think that's the time we have for today.
Yep.
Discussing this. Might dive into something similar later on. It makes me think of even agentic AI and what that's going to do to advertising in the long run. But thank you for listening, and we will check with you next week.
Cheers.
Cheers.